Shameca Tankerson. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
I am feeling doper than dope right now, and I'm excited to be here with you.
Doper than dope. I'm going to jump on the dope train with you. We're just going to dope this out. I'm grateful to be here with you too. So tell me, what be your intention for this dope conversation?
I just want to give some people some truth serum, whatever that is, however it comes, just, let's just chat and see how we can inspire, empower, and edify people.
Edify. Now that's interesting. You use that. I've never had that popped up before, but what do you mean by edify?
So for me, edify is almost like reinforcing, lifting people up. And so sometimes, like right now, we're in a time where there's, for lack of better terms, the word that's floating around right now is uncertainty, right? There's fear. People don't know what the future holds. We're worried about the health of ourselves and our family. And sometimes you need reinforcement, right? And so my love language is actually words of affirmation.
You are beautiful, and I mean that.
Thank you. Keep it coming.
I got plenty more for you. We got however long this is going to take. I got all kinds of loving coming for you.
Yeah. So edifying people is that, like using your words to hold them up.
Which is, it's so important, especially now. And actually it's great that you bring up the awareness of knowing what your love language is. Because sometimes it's like trying to put on clothes that don't fit, and somebody's not speaking that love language to you, and maybe they're giving what they want to receive, but being able to acknowledge somebody and to have them really get it. Actually, one of our common mutual connections relationship, one of my coaches, Iman, always talks about how when we can really edify somebody, that it can elevate their listening of themselves. And when somebody has an elevated listening of themselves, they show up differently. They show up more powerfully. And I know that that's something that you're really committed to, is that people really know and own their power.
Absolutely. I think that's super important. I think we get socialized to mimic and look like everyone else. And some of us are fortunate enough to get to a point in life where there's an awareness that this is who I am and who I want to be. And I think when you start to get grounded in that and lean into that, incredible things start happening. The ripple effect of how you impact people. And it doesn't have to be huge waves. It's just your presence to someone is powerful. And everyone doesn't get that opportunity, right? Because society says you should do this or be this way or that way. And it actually takes courage to own your power, right? Because sometimes that may require you to go against the grain or what is deemed as normal for other people. Look at you. Your name is Wolf. That's you owning your power, right? That took courage to do that, but it's your truth.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting the dichotomy that I experienced with that in my family. I have some family members who I've never even spoken to, and they started calling me Wolf. And then obviously, my parents, they still call me by my birth given name, which is Jared, which is totally fine. I have no attachment to who calls me what. I just know that the people who know me, know me, they call me Wolf. And regardless, my goal in any of that is not to force my truth onto somebody. That would be against everything that I'm for. It's about me being able to own it. And like you said, when I can own it, in a way, it also gives people around us the permission to do the same.
Absolutely. I think when I met you, you were still Jared.
Yes, I was.
And I remember the transition to Wolf wasn't a thing. It was just because you owned it so well, that it just was a seamless transition. Oh, okay, well, that's Wolf now. And I don't even think about, not that Jared doesn't exist, because he does, right? But it wasn't a forced thing now I have to remember to call this person Wolf. You embody it so well. And I think that's what owning your power is all about.
And that's something that is kind of a guiding light for your mission, isn't it?
Absolutely. One of my favorite poems and quotes, and there's lots of, there's a little bit of, we don't know who it really originated from, if it was Marianne Williamson or if it was, wow, why can't I remember his name?
Love her. She's great.
This is crazy. Why can't I remember his name?
What would I know him from?
The guy that was locked up in South Africa.
South Africa. I thought you were going to say Nazi Germany. I was going to say
Nelson Mandela. Oh my God.
That went straight out my brain.
Having a total brain fart.
And we own it and we're walking.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of back and forth about who actually originated it, whether it was him or her, but the poem, Our Deepest Fear. So our deepest fear is that we're not inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It's not our light, but our darkness. I can't remember the rest of it, but it goes on to say, when we shine, as children do, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. And I believe that I'm called to lead leaders of leaders, and how they lead is by the essence of who they be, not necessarily what they do.
Yeah, it's in a way, it's helping people to remember and recognize the giant within them. And something that it popped into my awareness recently was the distinction between becoming versus remembering. And this was something, again, I can say his name a million times just because he's so quotable, but Iman dropped this on me. And he said that the difference is in the becoming. It's as if you're at the base of the mountain looking up and saying, one day I'll be worthy of that, or one day I will be there, or one day I will have done enough to be able to say that after I've gotten my bruises and my scars and I blood dripping down my face and I have 10,000 pounds of sweat, which we would say hours, and that equals mastery, whatever arbitrary number we came up with. Somehow we did that, measured that. But one way of looking at it is one day I can get there. And that's the process of becoming. But what he shared with me actually yesterday, and it is completely altering my perspective on life, is remembering. And this is the top down approach where it's like, I am worthy. And I look down and I see all of these cobwebs that I need to go and clear out that have blinded me or made me forget that I am already this way. I am already powerful. I am already capable. And sure, there's some process of skill development that might need to occur and undergo in order for us to be able to actualize on our potential. And as you mentioned, being able to awaken the giant within, to kind of quote Tony Robbins' book a little bit. I think that's the name of the book. But being able to own that inherently, I feel like, call it God, call it universe, call it whatever you'd like. Like, it's almost like that was innate within us, but somewhere along the lines that is ripped away from us.
Absolutely. I have a saying, and I don't know where I heard it, so it's not my saying, but whenever we forget things or we think that we can't, just like to breathe and say, my soul remembers how to do this. Because it's already imprinted in your DNA, right? Your leadership, your presence, your power, your purpose. I believe, people are always looking to find their purpose. I'm like, purpose was seated in you before the beginning of time. It's that knowing, right? That remembering. Instead of trying to become the purpose, it's remembering you are purpose.
I got chills. Remembering you are the purpose. Okay, this is great. I have a feeling that this is going to be like a really heavy, a concentrated point of focus on this episode. This is great. I love this. So what is purpose defined for you? And ultimately, what is your purpose?
So this is like a cool conversation to have right now, because I think in the defining of purpose, like there is this, it's almost like that difference between becoming and remembering, right? When we're trying to define purpose, we're looking outside of ourselves for what we must do, the doing. And I believe purpose is in your being. When I look at my purpose on this earth, it has nothing to do with like, I'm supposed to impact this many people, or I'm going to go do these great things. When I look at who I've been for the entirety of my life, when you do that, when we all do that, I think you can find what your purpose is. And I did that a few years ago. And here's what I realized, that no matter how old I was and what I was doing, I always inspire courage and possibility in people, just simply by being. Just who I am beckons people to rise when they are in my presence. That's my purpose. That's it. And I don't even have to try to do that. I just show up and it happens. That's what I believe purpose is. It's just who you be.
I got goosies the whole time. I just felt like waves just flowing through me. And this is great because I think the misconception, and I was just reading this today, is we mistake our purpose for our occupation. And I think that our occupation should be a reflection of our purpose. And it's in essence the work that is the offspring of this, as you mentioned, already intended being before we even came here. That purpose, perhaps you call it your why, you call it your mission, your vision for the world. Martin Luther King Jr.'s mission for equality for all people. I have a dream. And it's remembering that to me is ultimately why I started this podcast. Rather, I say I actually seek to remove that. Why we started this podcast, why we started this movement, is because there are so many like myself whom not only did we forget, but we're not taught how to remember. And then there is so much noise. It's like I have earbuds in right now. There's so much noise. You have to be this way. Your hair has to look this way. You can't do these types of sports. You have to go and get this type of job. You have to go and get this degree, and you have to do all these things. And it can be so difficult to tune all of that out. And whatever your process is for remembering that, actually, that is probably a great question. Is how do we begin to tune that out and to tune into that voice? Whether you call it, maybe you call it God, maybe you call it spirit, but tune into that voice and look back, not from a place of apathy or even like regret, but, oh, these are all breadcrumbs pointing at, I believe you said courage. You invoke courage. And what was the second word?
Possibility.
Possibility. How did you see that?
So I was actually at a workshop. That's how I saw it. I was at a workshop and someone asked me, like, if you look back, like as long as you could, as far back as you could as a child, what were you always doing? And I'll tell you, when I came up with the answer, immediately something inside of me said that's wrong, right? Because society says you can't just be courage and possibility. It's got to be something deeper. But when I look back at every time I try to do something, it kind of seems easy. I make it look easy. I make it look good, right? And so even as a child, I would do things and then lots of other people would get the courage to try it. I not recently, like a couple of years ago, jumped out of a plane. You would not believe how many people sent me messages saying, I'm going to do it now. By this point, though, I know that's who I be, right? I do CrossFit. And I get messages all the time from people that are like, I'm working out now because of you and the fact that you showed me those things. It's who I be. So if you follow the trail and you look at how you've interacted with the world and people and society for the entirety of your life, you'll see purpose. You'll see if you're a person who is, someone who is like a helper and you're meant to uplift people and help them, or supporter, you'll know what that is. My job in life has always been for those who come across my path, for them to leave bolder, even when I'm not trying.
Because that's how you be.
Yeah, it just is.
And even jumping out of a plane, that is an expression, that's a doing of your being, because that takes courage. That takes a certain amount of go get it possibility, of overcoming something like that. And, we see the doing, but it is your being. Your being is what produces that doing.
Right.
And this is really great because this is what now my journey has become. And I think so many of us have the opportunity to do, given the, it's, what is it, April 24th, obviously we're in whatever state that COVID is in right now. And so many of us, yeah.
We're in the state where we all need haircuts and our nails done.
Yeah, the weave is all over the place. I was just telling you before. I made my request that if somebody knows of any essential barbers, hook a brother up. Let me know, because it's getting ratchet in here, and we're just gonna own it for now.
Yeah,
but hey, and also some damn cuddles, hair, fingers, nails, and cuddles. Those are those are necessities.
I'm not even a big hugger or anything, but right now I'm like, I just want to hug everybody.
I am a hugger. So it's like whatever you're experiencing, mine has also gone to that depth and further. I'm like, where are my people? I just want a big old hug. Line up, everybody. Free hugs. I'm going to for t-shirt, free hugs. Hashtag quarantine, hashtag 6 feet or however 6 yards, whatever the hell it is. So do you relate to yourself as always having been this courageous person of possibility? Like, have you just always been this badass? Because I think for some people, like myself, the remembering, it's easy to look at someone like you, purple hair, jumping out of planes, this amazing human being, and be like, oh man, looking up. It's like a looking up type effect. Because it's like, I don't know if I could really be that person. What got you to this state? Because I don't know if you just woke up like this, like every single day. Something tells me you went through something. I think you like Beyonce, right?
I do.
You do love you some Beyonce.
I do. So I'll say this, because I think there's a dichotomy to what you just asked. Because if I've been this way since the beginning of time, I have always been this way. I didn't always recognize it.
Ooh.
So when I got a chance to go back through my life, it's like, oh, shoot, you are pretty badass. And you just need to own that. It's just who you are. Look at all these things that you've always overcome. When faced with something, you can always figure out a way, right? That's where the possibility comes in. So yeah, I've always been this way, but I didn't recognize it. I didn't own it. If I were to go back, let me think of a moment. For me, having people in my life, like you have them on, having coaches and self-development is what started heightening my awareness. But the moment where I really, really wanted to or decided to step into the fullness of who I am started back in a previous recession that we were in when I lost everything. And losing everything brought up an identity crisis for me. There was shame, a huge amount of shame, feeling like I had lost, right? Like I had worked so hard on my life for so much. And so here I was, a person with multiple degrees, someone who had earned 6 figures by the time I was 20, I think 24, 25 years old. And I think around that time I was probably around 30-ish. So here I was 30 years old, and everything that I worked for, my nice big house, cars, all the stuff that I thought made me who I was stripped away. And when stuff gets stripped away like that, especially the things that you find your identity in, I don't care if it's people, relationships, or things, when it disappears, it's an opportunity, it's an invitation to rise. So you have a choice, right? You can lose yourself in the lamenting of the loss, or you can find out who you really are. And so in that moment of having lost everything that I had poured my identity into, because I wanted to prove to people that I was worthy, I had no choice unless I was going to crawl under a rock and just live my life that way, but to start to get real about who I was as a person and own the journey that I had to that point. There's something that I talk about and the work that I do that comes from that moment. And it's permission slips. I had to give myself permission to do some things. And so the way that I got to the point where I was willing to look at myself as powerful continually, even in my setbacks, failures, and disappointments, right? I have flaws and everything, but that does not negate my power. So I'm literally broke. I have children that I need to feed, and I go from high on a hog, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, living immaculately, to sitting in the welfare office because I needed to feed my children and feeling like I stood out like a sore thumb. I did not, one of these things is not like the other, right? I didn't belong, but it was where I was at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember like sitting there and looking around, definitely feeling like all eyes were on me, and like so much shame about it that I can like feel the hair on my arms, like standing up for like, why am I here in this space needing this support? And I remember just being so ashamed and almost audibly hearing what I'm going to call the voice of God saying to me, this is not over. Get up and fight. And so in that moment, I didn't know what I was doing. In hindsight, I went back to look. People have asked me over years, what's this pivotal moment for you? And I realized that that moment was about me giving myself permission. And there was 3 permission slips. Would you like for me to share them with you?
No, not. If you ever want a cliffhanger, and this is the end of the episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. Follow the wolf. All right, peace.
Hey guys. Nice to see
Tune
you.
in for the next episode. Give it to me.
All right, so I'll give them to you. So the first permission slip was permission to trust, to own my value. Let's say that. Permission to own my value, right? To own my value. That I have an innate value that no one, no thing, no circumstance, no situation can take away. And so the way that I illustrate this, actually, I do have something.
Look at that.
I can do it. I usually illustrate it with money. I typically will do it with $100 bill because it's more visceral for people when I do it with $100 bill.
Sure.
But let's pretend like this is $100 bill.
So for those of you who are not looking at the video, she's holding up a dollar bill right now as an analogy.
Absolutely. So if I were to ball this money up, how much would it be worth?
Still $1.
Okay. And if I were to throw it on the ground and drag it under my feet, how much would it be worth?
Last time I checked, it was still $1.
Yeah. So, and if I were to rip it?
Should still be $1, I think.
Right. So no matter what happens to this thing, it doesn't lose value. And that was like a deep understanding. I wasn't showing up in the world that I was supposed to show up how I was supposed to show up, because I was in deep shame about my setbacks, my failures, my disappointments, the things that I had lost, the things that I had gone through, because I had been with myself through all of those things all the time. And I let it siphon my value, my courage, my self-esteem. And so that day I wrote myself a permission slip to own my value, realizing that it never goes away. And then I began to feel a little bit more powerful. Mm-hmm. The second permission slip that I had to write myself was to trust the wisdom within me. You know, when I'm working, I'll say my expert status, but the wisdom that I possess, just because I went through some things, it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away at all. And so I took a page out of Muhammad Ali's book. And so there's a thing that I do all the time. I always ask people, who's the greatest boxer of all time? They'll always say Muhammad Ali. And I'll say, who said he was the greatest? He did. He said he was the greatest. And I think coming to yourself is where you have self-love and self-value first, before you're like, we're waiting on invitations to hang out with certain people, play on the big kids playground, be friends in parts of cliques and all kinds of things, right? But in reality, the first relationship that you have, or responsibility of a relationship, is to yourself. You deem yourself worthy. You deem yourself lovable. You love yourself. And that's what he did. In fact, he said, I said I was the greatest before I ever knew I was. Before I ever was, I was saying I was the greatest. He called that thing into existence. So that was the next permission slip. And then the last one was to stop hiding. I was hiding in plain sight. I would, because I wanted to put a persona out for people, like how I thought people would accept me, I would wear, can you imagine this, Jared? I want you to think about this. I would wear navy blue suits and a string of pearls.
Okay. If you don't know her at some point, you should check out her profile. You'll know that that's absolutely not how this woman rides.
Yeah, but I used to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, okay, this is who you are in the world. This is what your job title is. I was in financial services at the time.
Yep.
And so there came a space where I had to give myself permission to stop being seen, but not really being seen, right? To stop hiding who I be, the essence of who I am. So yeah, now I'm rocking my natural hair. Sometimes it's shaved on one side. It's been purple for almost 5 years. I just roll how I roll.
Bold.
And life shifted and changed and became more juicy and powerful for me when I stopped hiding. And mostly it's hiding in plain sight. So giving myself permission to be seen. To really, actually, let's say this, giving myself permission to be witnessed in all my glory, whatever that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You and I had a conversation when we were coming into this. Should I put on lipstick or not put on lipstick? I decided not to.
Yeah.
You guys can just see me like I am, if you can see me.
Now you imagine in your head just someone with lipstick or without, and she chose not, which that's owning that for you.
Right. It's just who I am. I mean, I got my magnetic lashes on because that's what we're doing in quarantine.
Me too. You gotta do what you gotta do. Hey, eyebrows on fleek all the time. Okay, so. Not to put words in your mouth, but the first one is really to really own our own self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's not only is it, I guess the owning it becomes almost like a step after remembering. Would you say? It's like you remember and then it's like, oh, I have a choice here. And then to choose to say, I'm going to own this now, I would imagine it wasn't just like, you're like, all right, cool, I own it. And now it's just like this all the time. Like that was this process of having to check yourself out of the old way of being and doing, because naturally what wants to arise are these old thought, feeling, behavioral patterns that want to slip back into, I'm not worthy. I'm only worthy if.
Absolutely. I don't think you ever arrive in that. I'm constantly, I believe that whatever your core wound is or whatever, if you have an unworthiness conversation that's going on, it will continue to show up. It just continues to show up at different levels, right? So it's a day by day, minute by minute, sometimes second by second choice to own your worthiness and your value.
I mean, I know I've been diving into this. I'm pretty sure that my core wound is worthiness. I'm almost certain, because as I dive deeper into my truth, the reason why I haven't owned my truth and ultimately, deciding I'm going to change my name to Wolf and live as who I say I'm going to be versus who I was told I'm going to be, that was because of this deep, deep yearning for acceptance and approval and validation for the people around me. Because if that gets revoked, who am I? Because we are we are taught in a way that who we are is in relationship and association with the things and the people around us. Much like how you pointed out that your relationship to your own self-worth was attached to maybe it was the cars, the house, the lifestyle, and all of a sudden that's revoked. And it's like, here I am in welfare, looking around like I don't belong here.
Right. Yeah, I was naked as far as I was concerned. And not naked in a way, like all of those things covered me, the person, the human, right? The spirit, the soul. those things were actually in the way. Being naked, there was nothing wrong with me being naked. I just perceived it as being wrong.
Ooh.
Right? I came into the world naked. Right? But we do all these things to cover ourselves, or I did. I won't put that on everybody else. I did all of those things to cover the worthiness issue, right? I was in a cycle of proving, a huge cycle of proving. And so, yeah, when everything was stripped away, the only thing that was left was me. And at that moment, I didn't deem it enough. It wasn't enough. I wasn't enough.
That's exactly how it was for me when it came to schooling. The reason why I finished college all the way through, because I knew that I wasn't pursuing the degree that I was pursuing for myself. The reason why I stuck it through was because, well, I can't let my family down, because I'm going to be the first person to graduate from my family with a degree. And my parents and everyone have so much writing on this. They invested time. They took care of me. They put a roof over my head. They did all of these things to prime me up. And I will never forget walking across, shaking the hands with all these weirdos with their Hogwarts looking outfits on, looking like something out of Harry Potter, getting my flimsy piece of paper, sitting down, looking at my family off to my left. They're super pumped and excited, and hearing the however many thousands of people are in this auditorium, and like the voices starting to go silent as I'm looking at this and thinking to myself, was this what this was all about? Now I have this piece of paper. Am I worthy of doing something valuable in this world? Can I now go into the workforce and take all of this time, effort, energy, the resulting depression and anxiety that I went through, like all of that, is that now I'm worthy? I can now go and do something of service to this world. That was a tough place to be. And that was actually only 5 or 6 months before I met you and went to that event. And that was when I declared, in a way, that was one of the first declarations where I was just like, it can't continue being this way for our young people. I mean, and people in general. I know there are people, I can imagine, go in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they'll die with the regret of never living a life true to them. Matter of fact, I was just reading something that talked about, I can't remember the woman's name, but she did some research. She was working at a facility where they basically took care of, people who were in there, who were elderly before they passed. And she surveyed them and listed the top 5 regrets. And the first one that was listed was that they were afraid to live a life true to themselves, not affected by the opinions of others.
Wow.
Number 1 regret.
Wow. When I hear that, it makes me think a couple of things. One, I'm like, wow, that's crazy that's the number 1 regret of anybody who's like leaving this planet and this earth. Because you feel like, oh, well, I'm not alone, but also how sad is that we live in a society where we put so much on people. And then the other side of me goes, I'm so glad I'm on this journey of freedom to be me. And I'm calling it a journey because it is that, right? I don't know that there ever is an arrival, but I know that I want to continually give myself permission to just go deeper and deeper into who I am and who I really be, and peeling like these layers and layers of imputed behavior, standards that have nothing to do with the essence of who I am. So kind of grateful to have that experience. And yet still knowing, and it goes back to what we were talking about though, right? If you and I are doing this work, then there's a ripple effect to that.
Yeah.
There are other people who are going to be liberated by the freedom that we give ourselves to let go of all those things and to not be one who lays down with that regret when it's all said and done and when we take our final breath.
Oh man. That is the essence of the butterfly effect. The butterfly flaps its wings here and it's felt across the world. And I heard a quote somewhere, again, source, I'm not sure, but it said that the wealthiest place on the planet is the graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really tough pill to swallow.
I spend a lot of time in the graveyard. It's one of my favorite places to go to.
I'm
kind of getting emotional thinking about it. I will spend hours witnessing the dead and realizing that there are lots of dreams, ideas, inventions, loves, unrequited love, all in this space. And so I walk stones and I look at birth dates and death dates and see who's all around them and try to correlate things. It's one of my favorite pastimes to do, and try to remember or try to think of what life was like when they walked the earth. And it also, for me, correlates back to we are living in history now. And at some point in time, someone will be walking past a place where I'm laid to rest, right? My grave. And I will have gone. My breath would have left my body. And I would have done all that I could do in my lifetime. And all that would be left is that. So it doesn't matter where I travel to, if I have time, I'll spend time in a graveyard. It's one of the places I will always go.
I have two things I want to say about that. First is I never connected it that deeply, but now you make me want to actually follow in that sentiment, because I remember the one time that I went to a graveyard. I believe it was the Arlington Cemetery. Mm-hmm. This was the one, I think, in DC. I was in DC. I remember I was in DC, but whatever the name of the cemetery was that was dedicated to Vietnam, I believe it was Arlington. I could be wrong. Somebody will correct me if I'm not right. But I remember feeling the space, and you couldn't help but just hear the bellows and feel the bellows of all of the mourning of loss. And there's this heaviness that comes with the idea of death and dying and passing. And one thing that I always hope is that when I go, and it reminds me of this great quote I heard from Eminem. I think it was in I think it was the song Spacebound. He said that instead of mourning your death, I'd rather celebrate your life, elevate to new heights, step on the gas and accelerate. I'm gonna need two mics. Like, wanted that. What I hope is that at my passing, that they're not mourning as much as they're celebrating a life, and they're laughing and they're telling great stories of times that they connected with me. And I only just recently hit this point in listening actually to Gary Vaynerchuk, where he said that his measure of success is based off of the number of people at his funeral. I realized that in hearing that, I was like, I want the measure of success in my life to be the number of people who felt like they were loved, cared for, or seen by me or someone in the community that we created, that they felt loved. Mm-hmm. And my question to you is, here we are, we're at your funeral. People are there. You're all the people that maybe you've been impacted by you, or the people who you love. What is the lasting message or the lasting thing you would hope that people would get when that journey comes to its beautiful transition?
So I feel like I have two sides of a coin on my lasting message. The first one is that life is meant to be lived. Mm-hmm. That's it, right? I don't know if you've ever heard the poem, The Dash. Mm-hmm. And there's a poem, I don't know the poem by heart, but you can look it up. The poem, The Dash, is all about the dash between your birth date and your death date on your tombstone. I want my dash to be full. Life, love, impact, all of those things. I want it to be full, not full in mass, right? but fully lived, fully experienced, fully felt. So that's the thing, is that people would know that life is meant to be lived. And then the second part for me, because I am a follower of Christ, is that I lived my life wholly and completely in service of that. Period. That's it.
I feel like when we can have these types of conversations with ourselves and the people that we care about, and we can start to, just like with any great goal, any great mission, any great battle, any great course you've taken, or even Netflix series, there's there's this idea of where we want to land. And when we can, I think, take the heaviness out of that for a second and just really think, okay, got it. Like, this is it. I'm going. What do I want to leave the world with? And then walk backwards from that point. We can begin to see, is what I'm doing now going to be a reflection of that life?
Right.
Am I going to choose to play my life on the side of the team that plays safe and secure, and in avoidance of potential condemnation from people who, quite frankly, don't see us to begin with, and they're walking around blindfolds themselves? Will I choose to follow that path, or will I choose to skirt into the finish line of life, bruised, bloodied, but having lived a fully life? Like, shoes are like, the soles are ripped off and you've already taped them 3 separate times, but man, you rode the dark horse into the night. Don't go silent in that quiet night. There's some quote like that, like, don't go quiet in that silent night. Like, we did it. How do we walk ourselves backwards to this point and begin to live that life?
First, I want to say that that's actually quite, I don't want to call it difficult, but it has to be intentional. And we're not always intentional in life, right? So I think there's going to be ebbs and flows where things bring us back to center. Like, now is a moment that can bring us back to center and go, how do I want to live? How do I want to impact? How do I want to lead, right? Because you can get in that mundane of just doing what you do every day. And it's easy to get there and be intentional sometimes and not intentional. I don't know anybody who's 100% intentionally living the life they want to live all the time. Because guess what? We're human beings. We have emotions. We make mistakes. There's things that happen, right? So I think awareness is the first thing, right? So you're aware that you want to live a life like that.
Yeah.
And so then when you begin to pattern interrupt and begin to develop habits around the life that you want to lead and what you want to leave behind, the legacy you want to leave behind, you'll have more occurrences of living in that space than not.
And also being able to, I would imagine, bring compassion when we're not that thing, because it's easy to beat ourselves over the head when we pick up that spoon and we start shoveling some ice cream into our face when we know that we committed to not doing that. And it's like, I'm already like 2 heavy scoops in. And actually, something I read, this book is called Own Your Day, Own Your Life by Aubrey Marcus. I'm a big fan of his work. And one of the things that he said in his book is that sometimes the most amazing choice that we can ever make is when we're 2 or 3 bites into that ice cream and we just say, I don't have to keep going. I don't have to finish this deed. I can stop right now. And that is still a win.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a big fan of grace for yourself. I'm like, be gracious with yourself always.
All the time.
I hear people, especially when they're like dieting, like you're talking about the bowl of ice cream. It's like, I'm having a cheat day, or, I'm really, really trying. I'm like, I don't even look at it as cheat days. I look at it as a decision, right? I chose to have the ice cream, and then I chose to stop when I stopped. And guess what? That is still a win, right? It's all decisions. So I think having grace with yourself cultivates you having grace with other people.
Okay, that's interesting. Do you think that in a way that if we were to have more grace with ourselves, say when we pick up that tub of ice cream and we eat it, that we would be more likely to get back on track, and perhaps it's the beating ourselves over the head that has us continue to get off that track?
Absolutely. That is a very powerful belief of mine.
So in a way, it's intentionally creating space for the misdirection, knowing that, and not to get complacent, like, oh, well, I'll just have grace. And then like, kind of like, use that as like a weird, like self-tricking way to
Right.
make it okay. But to say, you know what, like, yeah, I'm going to eat this ice cream and I'm going to be back in the gym and I'm not going to keep doing this, but grace, like to allow that.
To allow it. I'm actually on a weight loss journey right now. So it's funny that we're talking about this. And so is my daughter. And so, she's very stringent about what she's eating and when she's eating and how much
I
of
talked
this
to her. She was showing me.
Yeah. she's like way into it. And I'm just in a space in my life where I'm like, if I want a peanut butter sandwich, I'm going to have one.
Yep.
And then I'll wake up the next day and she'll be like stalled on the scale. And I'm like, oh, lost 2 pounds. Because I think there's some emotion to that as well, right? To the releasing of the weight and all of those things. And so if we don't put so much weight and heaviness on the situation or the mistake, we can have the peanut butter sandwich or the spoonful or 2 or 3 of ice cream or the freaking tub if you want it.
If you got to do it.
Right. And then just keep moving. Just keep moving. Swimming. I think though that I have that is a knowing of mine because of everything I've been through. So remember my story, all failures, setbacks, disappointments. I've learned to be gracious with myself in all ways,
And there's something about the setbacks and the fall downs and the landing directly on your face, rolling over, and like, again, I got to get better with like naming my quotes. It's going to happen. One day I'll just be like, all my quotes will be just on point, just right off the top of my head. But there was this quote. I remember I was listening to a motivational video. I got really big into motivational videos for a while, just like listening, like, yeah, I'm motivated. Just brush my teeth with real intention. Just getting pumped for the day. My teeth getting extra white. But one of the things it said is if you can look up, you can get up. Mm-hmm. And being able to just roll ourselves over. I know I had a point in this. Honestly, I got a little bit psyched up.
I think that's Les Brown, by the way.
Les Brown?
Mm-hmm. If you can look up.
Les Brown. I thought you were referring to my teeth. I was just like, I don't know why they'd be brown. I was a little bit lost. Like, what do you mean, Les Brown? Like, they're not brown. Like, I got something in my teeth right now?
Okay. I'm completely dead with that.
Then that is the name of the show right there. Les Brown ? My teeth are no. That actually probably is Les Brown. Now that you think about it, I can hear his voice in my head saying, yeah, if you could look up, yeah, that's him. You're totally right. It's absolutely Les Brown. That man is a motivational fool.
Yeah.
He's inspiring everybody. I know I had a point in this. I don't remember what it was. However, kind of tying it back to, so this is interesting. This was like a big, deep rabbit hole down to your point one about self-worth. And I think in a way we actually tied into, I believe your second one was about trust, about trusting this inner guidance. Mm-hmm. How do you turn that volume up? So I've had this conversation with a couple of people, and I'm really curious to hear everyone's perspective, because it's really easy to get lost in all the voices that are, and this is not even just the outside voices. This is like our own inner chatter. How do you distinguish between the voice of the truth of your inner guidance and you maybe call it ego, maybe you call it, old programming, inner child? How do you manage that?
Okay, so I kind of have 3 things to say about this. First, take risk. Mm-hmm. Right? There's some courage required. And then that risk may look like, which is the second thing, going against the grain. So if all is saying go this way, we'll typically go, well, if everybody's saying that, then I should probably just do what everybody else is doing. Sometimes take that risk to go the opposite of what everybody else is doing. And yeah, you might be alone and, there may be all kinds of things that could happen, but the more you do that, the more it's a working of a muscle, right? You'll go, oh, that wasn't really my inner guidance. That was pretty stupid. Right. And you'll start to know, which leads me to the third thing. If your mom were to call you in a crowded room, would you know her voice? Absolutely. Right? I know my kid's voice, but my kids know my voice. If I were to say, hey, from across the room, they would know my hey.
Yeah, I think that you have a very distinct hey, I'm sure, but yes, I get what you're pointing at.
And so the point of this is the more time you spend with someone or something, that intimacy breeds familiarity. And so that honing of the inner wisdom and the inner guidance is you've got to be in it. You've got to allow it to guide you sometimes, right? No matter come what may, right? Your inner guidance may guide you down a path that doesn't seem as expedient as you thought it would be, but it was still for you. And the more you do that, you begin to be able to drown out the other voices because you're intimate with it. And you know when it's truth. You're like, oh yeah, that's a hit. If you don't spend time with it and you're always just following whatever everybody else is doing and what's coming your way, you won't begin to trust your inner wisdom because you don't know the sound of its voice.
I find these last two, the one that sound like familiarity is what I heard. And then the second, which is to really start to be okay with going against the grain. This to me is one of the most difficult things that I'm encountering in my journey. The reason being, especially when it comes to going against the grain, because it's really easy to lend over our inner intelligence for that of somebody who is the expert. So for example, I'm in a lot of circles regarding the podcasting. I'm newly starting this podcast. And in and of itself, the way that I'm choosing this format is already against the grain. Most people say, oh, especially the people you want to talk to, they have no attention span. There's no way that they're going to listen to an hour and a half long podcast, or even sometimes longer. I've had all the way up to 2 hours. And even thusly is you need to have a specific down nitty gritty niche of what you're speaking to and who you're speaking to. That's like really big in the market, especially in entrepreneurship, is niche. And I hear everybody saying niche. I'm like, okay, I got that. But my inner guidance right now is telling me that I'm still figuring out who I am and what medicine I am serving. And I think sometimes meeting myself where I'm at looks like all I know is I'm committed to truth. And I believe that the audience is going to reveal itself as I go along. That's what my inner guidance is telling me. And even though I get it, you've gone down this path, you've probably made great bits of money and success, fame, whatever you want to call it. But right now my inner guidance is saying, hey, we're still where we're at and they're where they're at and they're looking from where they're at. And we need to find our way. So it's tough because there is an expert that says, do this thing. But then there's the part of me that's like, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's always a way to do a thing. There's plenty of ways to do a thing, but that way is not always your way. Right? There's times where I miss an exit on a freeway or take a turn just because, or maybe Siri takes me a different way or whatever the case may be. And realizing, okay, I could have gotten there faster. However, maybe when I got to the point that I was getting to, there was an accident. Oh, wow, I missed that. I will never know if I could have been a part of that had I went that direction, right? Sometimes maybe you just need time. So it looks like a misstep, but you're like right now, it may feel like a misstep because your podcast doesn't look like anyone else's. But I promise you, you are growing in leaps and bounds. Right? You are getting what you need. It's not about the way, it's about your way. I don't mean like your way to do it. It's your path. It's your path. And I believe inner guidance guides us to our path. And, inner guidance will tell you if you should go with the path. But until you start to trust it, or not even trust it, to play with it sometimes. Like right now, you're playing with your inner guidance. Yeah. You know what that feels like. This feels good to you, right? The more you do that, the more intimate you will become with it. And you'll be able to sense like in a moment, what's for you, what's not for you, what to do, what not to do, how you want to move, how you want to live, all of those things. And you can drown out everyone else. Laughing, fingers pointing, doesn't really matter. Because you have a knowing, what I call in your knower.
In your knower.
Right? Trust your knower. And most adults don't trust themselves. It's part of the work I do with my clients. The reason why they struggle, I teach sales. And the reason why they struggle most often is because they have learned to mistrust themselves. And they've given their power over to many, many experts and gurus and things like that. And so when you do that when you default to outside authorities instead of trusting your inner authority more often, it's like that. Easier. You're trained to that ear. So when somebody says go left, you go left, even though you probably should be going right and you want to go right, but you're trained to that ear. You're not listening to your own inner guidance. And so you have to learn how to trust yourself again. We also don't trust ourselves when we've made a lot of mistakes. right? If you've made decisions and they didn't quite turn out right, instead of you giving yourself grace, you beat yourself up and then you stop trusting yourself after you do it over and over and over again. Life is a bunch of trial and errors. Somebody had to eat a pineapple first.
Yeah, same. Somebody had to try the different mushrooms, and some of them were poisonous, and they're no longer here to tell us.
Right. So, and that's what life is about. And so if you can embrace that ride, that journey, there is no right and wrong. And for me, I err on the side of what I would want to do more than what somebody else is telling me their wisdom is guiding them to do. I take all wisdom, right? I'll take what's given to me and then I bounce it against my inner knowing. And I check myself for fear, because fear will make you have you lying and saying it's your inner knowing, but you're just afraid.
Sure.
But there's checks and balances, right? And that's all cultivated. You have to work it.
So that naturally ties perfectly into step 3, which the familiarity. How do you pragmatically approach developing that familiarity? What is there like, is it meditation? Is it just sitting down with yourself? Is it being in church? Is it journaling? What is your process of being able to develop that familiarity? Because I imagine just like with anything else, you step up to the plate and you're swinging and like you miss. Oh, you hit one. Okay, let me pay attention, because even in the misses, there's something to be learned. But ultimately, in that journey of, again, of remembering and ultimately the becoming in that particular process, becoming a proficient hitter, we then become able to, it's just like any sales process. At first, maybe you get 1 out of 10, then maybe you get 2 out of 10, then maybe it's going through that rigmarole sometimes. How do you pragmatically approach that?
I think there isn't a pragmatic to it. You have to be willing. This is where courage just comes into play. You have to be willing to risk things. You have to be willing to risk that you might choose wrong. It's like the sales call, right? You do them, you get a no, you get a no, you get a yes. You start to feel what a yes would feel like. You start to know what a client who would say yes looks like, right? Before they even get on the phone. It's the familiarity of it. But you have to be willing to risk being rejected in order to get there. It's the same thing. You have to be willing to risk swinging out, and not hitting a home run. You have to be willing to risk failure. You have to be willing to risk disappointment and not getting the outcome. If the people who are unwilling to risk never cultivate this gifting.
Okay. So it really does come, right? An experienced sailor has been through just treacherous seas, and it's you really do have to come in a way of knowing I might swing and miss and I might swing and hit, but ultimately I become more proficient in the doing, in the journey. But as long as my being is in alignment, then my doing it'll yield whatever it yields, but I can always learn and grow and learn and grow. And in the process, I'm sure you've learned in your sales process is that as you became a smoother sailor in the seas of sales, your ability to track, just looking at someone or even having a couple of conversations, you're like, oh, you know what? Yeah, this is a fit, or you know what? It's not a fit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's from doing it over and over and over again. And I think the same is true of your inner guidance and your inner wisdom. It's going to take some time.
So this is a perfect tie-in. So we've gone through the 3 major steps, and you kind of started to poke into your world of sales, because sales is really the expression of, I would imagine, this purpose that you have, right? This courage and possibility. How do you connect this commitment that people have, or rather you being able to reflect that to others so they see that for themselves? How is your sales, your business, how is that a reflection of that? How do those connect? Because I would say that is the vocation, that is the expression of this divine will inside.
It's the dopest thing ever. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just get to be who I be. So sales is a mirror for me. When money is introduced into a situation, people reveal things about themselves. And I truly believe that how you do one thing is how you do everything. So I use sales as a transformational tool to reveal people's power and where they lack and leak power as well. So if they are afraid to have a certain type of conversation with someone in a sales conversation, i.e. ask for money, right? They're leaking power and probably they're receiving mode. There's all kinds of things. And so I use sales as a mirror for this self-development, the development of the power, the trusting of your inner guidance and knowing all of that stuff. And it's so much fun to do. And so that's where the courage piece comes in. And then in possibility, because there is money involved, we have a measurement. So I have a client who this week just had her biggest sales day ever, cash, $55,000 cash in a day.
Shit.
And then I talked to her this evening or this morning, and she's like, I had a $96,000 week. And I'm like, you weren't going to call a sister and let her know? She's never done that before, right? But it's because of this process of owning the power, getting comfortable with that inner guidance and knowing who to get on the phone with, who not. She's got, an audience of people. I'm like, they want this offer. You just got to make it. And she had to have the courage to move past that. And now she's celebrating her biggest sales week, biggest cash day ever. Like walking around to her husband, like, look what I did.
Guess who's buying dinner tonight?
Right. But it's because, and I see this over and over again, many of my clients, because of this transformational process tied to sales, will do what they did in an entire year in a 90-day or less period of time when working with me. Because I'm constantly pushing the envelope of courage and possibility. Right. And that thing I talked about, your soul knows how. So I truly believe that if you've made $1 million over your lifetime, you hold in your DNA the blueprint to making $1 million. You just have to learn how to collapse time and do it faster.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do it in a day if you wanted to. You can do it in a year. You can do it in a month. It's all the makings of it is already there. Right. It's like having a blueprint to a house. You don't have to take a year to build a house. You could technically build a house in a day. Right. When you have everything there. And so that's what we're doing. But the way to do that is you have to be courageous.
The possibility is a possibility as a reflection of that courageousness. In other words, the more courageousness you have, the more likely that possibility shows up and shows up quicker.
Right. Or more possibility. So the more courageous you are, the more you expand your capacity to receive. People will always ask me, how much should I charge for something? I'm like, how much can you tolerate receiving? What possibility are you open to? And risking being open is courageous. Because if you ask someone, will you buy my $100,000 product, Wolf? You got to risk the fact that they're going to tell you no.
Mm-hmm.
But if you never take that risk, if you never try to sell the $100,000 product or service, you have no possibility of ever getting that 100K. You won't sell it. You didn't offer it. You're going to close 100% of what you don't offer. It's going to be zero. Yeah.
If you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Okay. So is there something to be said about God, the unseen, that in a way, if I am willing to, in essence, I'm making an offer, and the offer is, would you like to take, go on this journey? It'd be $100,000. Do you think in a way that courageousness that you're pointing at, if we're willing to go there, that almost like God's reward is saying, you were willing to go through this and take it on the chin, and you were willing to trust, there was the second one, trust in something beyond yourself and to follow that blueprint, to own up to that courage of a possibility. Now the reward is you get to have that result.
Well, and I think the reward can show up anyway. So it may not show up how you think it's going to show up, and it may not show up from that particular person, but because the request has been made known, it's already working, right? Again, being open to the multiple possibilities. This is the desire. The request has been made. It may be this person, it may be another person, it may be multiple ways that it comes, but I'm open to it, right? I think there is that capacity is really tied to your courage and willingness to ask.
And this is, To me, this is what a true expression of purpose embodied inside of an occupation that, perhaps you're calling it sales coaching, that you're able to give people, in a way, you could say like it's the money and everything else, but how they relate to themselves, everything changes.
Everything changes.
Because again, how you do one thing is how you do all things. If you're willing to make that 100K ask, I have to imagine that you're also be willing to make that ask, that scary ask inside of a committed relationship that has way more of an infinite value beyond 100K, where it's like, hey, you know what? Like, I would really appreciate it if tonight, because it's been so long, like honestly, we haven't been on a date together in like over 3 months. If we could just go on a date, you and I, leave our cell phones at home like we did when we were teenagers.
Yeah.
And like, although that might not seem like, 100K thing to some people, it is that way, because value is ultimately determined by the eye of the beholder.
Absolutely. I
remember, actually, that's a really long story to kind of run that one out, so I won't go there, but it just brings us back to that $1 crumpled thing, that the value is inherently in the eye of the beholder. You take a precious gem, a very precious, rare, one-of-a-kind gem to someone like myself who doesn't have an eye for it. You say, how much is it worth? And I tell you, well, I'll give you $50 for it. But you put that in someone who's like a gemologist, whatever the hell the term for that is, might say, that's worth $1 million.
Right. Right.
And you are giving people that possibility to see that within themselves.
Yeah. It's crazy to watch it manifest. And for me, it's a lot of fun. It's exhilarating watching the transformation, because you see it. If you look at a video or you experience a client of mine pre-me, and then you experience them after, you're like, what have you been drinking? They've been drinking their own Kool-Aid.
The Kool-Aid, yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I can't even explain. Can you tell how high I am just thinking about it? Like watching the transformation, and all it is them owning who they be, which opens up, they own it, they trust it, there's a knowing about it, and it opens up that possibility. But them owning and trusting it and having that knowing about it, that's where the courage is. Because what is the quote? See, you're rubbing off on me. The quote, in a world.
In a world.
In a
where
world.
Wolf and Shameca are having a podcast.
Yeah, it's like we're being the same as like touted as something, having your own opinion or being yourself as a rebellion or something like that. Like this world claps for people who are similar and alike. Even if I look in like the church world where I am, there are like certain types of pastors, they all dress the same way. Like, why do you guys all have on skinny jeans and these like...
They got on a Zoom call before it and they had to make sure they were coordinated, their ties and everything.
They don't even try. It's just a thing, right? We live in this world where that's what we do. And if you are the opposite of that, that takes courage, right? It is an act of rebellion. And so being yourself... It is a visceral, public act of rebellion. How dare you not use your birth name? Right?
No, seriously, like that to me is like one of like the just most whatever things that has happened as a product of this Follow the Wolf movement, because ultimately the running expression that I've been almost like using this as like the running motto for the podcast is truth withheld is poison, truth expressed is medicine. And at least in this point in my life, and I'm really, since you've had that conversation about the importance of looking back and really seeing that it was always there, at least in this point in my life, I believe that my medicine to serve right now is truth. And it starts with me. And what I unknowingly I was afraid was going to happen, ultimately did happen, was that this podcast was going to become about radical truth and honesty. And what that looks like is me having to fess up and own up to and nakedly walk out onto the stage, all spotlights shining on me with an entire crowd, millions of people looking out and saying, this is who I am. And it's absolutely terrifying, because when I realized that, at least right now, that my calling is to be the person that is going to spread this, is I now have to be the person who is going to be fessing up when I really fuck up. Mm-hmm. And when I fall short, and when I look in every direction, I look 360 view, I look at my family, I look at society, I look at public institutionalized education system and everything else. Who I see myself remembering, or what I'm remembering about myself, terrifies me, because it's against everything that I have been taught. And it takes something to go to the people in your life. And I've had this conversation with my mom that I am so deeply afraid to tell you that I've always felt that you would never love me if I didn't experience God and religion the way that you experience religion. And that love is conditional. And that is, if I can never truly be connected to you the way that I want to be connected, because my fear that if you know who I truly am, that's not lovable. Mm. It's terrifying. Changing my name to Wolf, that's, my mom was pissed about it for a little bit. She's like, "Come on, really? I gave you Jared." I'm like, "I know, I get it." But it's different when you go into a range and a variety of topics, when you're the one who is, in essence, shouting from a soapbox, "It's time to wake up."
Yeah. I totally get you. I'm the one shouting from a soapbox, own your power. Mm-hmm. Be who you be, right? And there's moments I want to be like everybody else. I'm not. I cannot be. That's not my truth, right? It's not the path that I walk. It's not how I lead. And if I ever try it, I'll fall flat on my face. And I do. I still toe dip sometimes. Let me see. It never works. It never works. Mm.
You have a podcast. It's called, I believe, Raise Your Game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I am guessing here, but something tells me that it's connected to all the other amazing things that you're doing. Is it ever relating to sales? What is Raise Your Game about?
It kind of it relates to sales, but it's just about how you can be your best, most powerful self. And in doing that, it directly correlates to how much impact and income you create in the world. Money is like a lot. So money and power for me go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And money is like one of the most shameful things in the world that people don't like to talk about. And so I talk about it because shame is one of my core wounds. And I talk about it overtly. And it's also one of those things I believe is a mirror, right? It's a mirror for the impact you have in the world. It's a mirror to show you how you show up, because we get all wonky when money is introduced into the situation.
It's true.
And so, which is why I deal with sales. And I want my clients to make as much money as possible, because that's where the ripple effect is for them. Right? I want them to build dynasty businesses. And the only way that they can do that is if they raise their game internally.
Yeah, it seems like with every single person I talk to, there's a full, deep, at least a knowing on a conscious level. Of course, knowing is not enough. That's one thing I tell people. I don't actually believe knowledge is power. I think knowledge is potential power, because I can know how to build a fucking house, but if I don't take that hammer and start,
absolutely,
that to me is one of like the rating problems with the world that we live in, is we consume. It's just this food, it's knowledge, it's information, it's all these things, but we don't take the time to sit and integrate and actually apply. And going from knowledge to experience to wisdom, as Joe Dispenza would say, going from thinking it, knowing it with my head, doing it with my hands, feeling it with my heart. Being able to actually take it and put that into practice is a completely different experience altogether. And I wonder, actually, no, this is where I was going with it, is so many of us know this conceptually, that it's not enough to know. And so many of us know that the work to do is as a foundation, right? Whenever you're building a skyscraper, or if you even think about a tree, the foundation, the soil, the land from which it sits on, ultimately is a determining factor in how great it can grow. But for some of us, we still continue to avoid doing the inner work, and our external results are oftentimes a reflection of that internal work, the depth of the roots, the depth of that knowing, the trusting in that voice. How do you encourage your clients to begin, maybe you've already kind of pointed at it, but to begin doing that internal work, the mindset or whatever it is, that reflection, to have our internal intentions then be directly manifesting into physical, tangible results, i.e. money and power. And ultimately, I've had a shift in the relationship to power, and power is really just the ability to influence and cause, to exert some kind of change. And that can, you can use power for good or bad. Morally, so to speak, but we can ultimately use it to serve us and those around us or not, but being able to use it in a way that serves everyone.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
So we open up a conversation about power in that we are always at choice. Nothing happens to us, right? We are constantly deciding. We're not victims of our circumstance. Like you can say, oh, I was late because, like right now, I needed to feed my kids or whatever. No, you chose that feeding your kids were more important. And if you can take full ownership of that decision, that's powerful. It's okay, right? So we start with that. You have full power and you are at choice, which leads us to everything you create in life is based on a decision. You are constantly making decisions. What you want to begin to do is make those decisions consciously instead of unconsciously. And so how do we do that? We have to begin to open up awareness.
Yeah.
And awareness is the key to everything. Once you become aware, you have no excuse.
No.
So when you become aware that you're producing a result that you don't want, when you become aware of what's tied to that result, every time you do it again, it was a decision. And so we start doing pattern interrupts back and forth with awareness and decisions, awareness and decisions, awareness and decisions. Until we create results. Because I believe that your beliefs are actually decisions that you made based on an experience that you had.
Repeat that. Beliefs are the product
of decisions, of an experience. It's the decision you made after an experience. So you experience a thing.
Yep.
And you assign meaning to that thing and you make a decision about it.
Yes.
That in turn becomes a belief that you hold.
Right. Someone bumps into me while I'm walking on the side of the road and I fall down, and then they just chuckle and walk on, and I make it mean that they don't care about me. And thusly I go even deeper and say, well, I must not be worthy. They must not care.
Absolutely. So that starts to affect your feelings and your thoughts.
Yep.
Right. And then those feelings and those thoughts actually start to show up in your actions. Well, if they don't care, then other people probably don't care. And if people don't care, I probably don't have anything value to say. So I'm not going to do a podcast because I don't know what to talk about.
I had that.
And then you get the result of not reaching more people, not having the podcast. And you're like, well, I don't know why. Let's go back to the decision, the point of decision. And every day, every moment, you get to make new decisions. What decision do you want to make in this moment? You decide differently. Your thoughts and your feelings go in a different way. Your actions then go in a different way. And then your results turn around.
And we're so up against ourselves. So a lot of the work that I'm doing right now is in the realm of neuroscience, epigenetics, and things like that. And one of the things that current neuroscience is showing us is that we have about 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. About 60 to 80% of them are negative. And each one of them has a biochemical signature of, negative thoughts lead to negative physiological effects on the body, and how about 95% of our behavior is subconscious, unaware to us, which is your point about awareness. If we aren't constantly in a state of new awareness, seeing those thoughts, noticing those feelings, which thusly often how we react, how we behave is in correlation with how we feel. If I feel super shit, I'm more likely to pick up that tub of ice cream.
Right.
But it takes something. I mean, it takes something to say, I feel bad. And what I normally do is I go and I pick up that tub of ice cream. But I know through trial and error, because I am the scientist in my life, that always yields the same result. And that's me feeling shame and guilt. And then thus we're back in this loop of not being worthy.
Well, and it's so unconscious, though, that what it takes sometimes is an outside person looking over you going, hey, there's that thing again.
Which is why we have mentors, coaches, and people.
Exactly.
This is brilliant. I was just reading something. It was this, I don't know. Are you familiar with Bruce Lee?
Like the karate guy?
Oh God, don't just say the karate guy.
Well, yeah, okay.
It's like saying Les Brown. Oh yeah, he does motivation stuff.
Well, I was just trying to make sure you weren't talking about like some guy that's walking the earth right now, Bruce Lee.
The karate guy. Jeez, Shameca. Guys, if you're listening, I'm sorry. The karate guy. No, he's like the father of mixed martial arts. So Bruce Lee, totally playing with you. Bruce Lee, he was also in conjunction with being an absolutely brilliant mixed martial artist and really the founder and paved the way for even Asian culture in America, because he was one of the first Asian actors to really have like a big impact that way. But in one of his movies, there was a scene where he's walking around this dojo, like you see like someone like with their hands behind their back, walk around with this, like, he always had this like intense look on his face all the time. He always had this like very intent look. Whatever he was doing, he was there. Matter of fact, I wrote on my arm, and my intention for the day and for this podcast, which I never even said, was I am the experience. I am the experience experiencing itself. And in the movie, he walks up to one of the students walking around this like dojo, so to speak. And he's like, all right, like, let's go. And they kind of like square up to fight. And he tells the kid, all right, hit me, punch me. And the kid goes to punch. And he's just like, no. He's like, that's not it. Try again. Tries again. Doesn't do it. And then on I believe it's the second or third time, he asks him to try again, and he does it. And then he's like, yes. He's just like, we need emotional content. He said it's like a finger pointing to the moon. And the kid looks at the finger and hits him on the head. And he's just like, don't look at the finger or you'll miss all of that heavenly glory. And when I looked up the deeper meaning behind it, one of the things that it talked about was the importance of losing oneself in the experience in order to create a deeper connection to the experience, so we can create a deeper connection to ourselves. But one of the things that also pointed at was the importance of relationship. And it's how in the relationship to others is how we end up figuring out who we are. Because that's that mirror, right? You as a coach, in a way, I come to you, you're my coach, and I got all this like gaga happening behind me. It's like all these like things like poking out, like, showing me like all these like, negative beliefs and everything. And you're really just like, yo, like, do you see that? And it's like, what are you talking about? I look and it's gone. But it's in that relationship and me being able to come to you and holding up that mirror that it's like, hey, that thing that you think that you're not worthy of asking for that 100K offer, that has no bearing on reality whatsoever. Matter of fact, I can see right behind you. And when they're able to see that reflection, it's like, have I been carrying this around all this time? It's like, yeah, it's okay. It's time to have grace.
Yeah. I think that process is so healing because, like you said, it's happening at a cellular level. Every time we pattern interrupt and begin to rewire those neural pathways of unconscious behavior that we've had for most of our lives, some of us, we're changing our DNA. We're changing the very way that we think. Like you said, it's epigenetics, right? And it's powerful and it's beautiful. And the power that it holds to affect change just in the atmosphere itself. It's not even just about the person's results or who they're becoming. There's like something that just goes out when you're releasing those unconscious negative behaviors that have been reinforced over and over, and our thoughts or feelings or beliefs that have been reinforced over and over again. And they just start to peel away, and then new connections are put in their place that reinforce value and that you're worthy and all of those things. Oh my gosh, it's super powerful.
This is great because we're talking about, in essence, pruning old synaptic connections that say I'm not good enough, firing and wiring Hebb's law, nerve cells that fire together, wire together, firing new ones that say I am worthy, I am good enough, I can ask for that. And this ties perfectly into the importance of having people to reflect back to you how powerful you are. And going back to the beginning of the podcast, you said edification. When you can get who you are and you can really start to see that in the reflection of others, we now have that possibility of courage and possibility, being able to step into our potential and not going to the graveyard, carrying all the weight of ideas that were once good, just like the weight of potential ideas, and then, passing. And then we look back as we're going through our life and we're reflecting on the top 5 regrets. And one of them says, if I could just have lived a life that was true to me. And the number 5 saying, I wish I could have just realized that I could have chosen to have been happy. Like we can choose in this moment to choose happiness, to choose we are worthy, and to do that with people who see the beauty in us. And sometimes, like me, and my deepest fear of unworthiness and not being loved is it takes leaving behind the known world, stepping into that unknown, finding your tribe that see you, just like in the Avatar. I see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of the reasons why I all of my programs are group programs. So it may have like a private component to it, but I put people in containers together, and that's why. Because it's a rapid acceleration of that reflection, right? And a rapid acceleration of possibility. You see one person go, you're like, oh, if she can do it, I can do it, because you've been seeing her or him for who they are, right? Just a regular person with same kind of problems. They think they're unworthy sometimes, just like you, and they just closed a $50,000 sale, right? Then you go, oh, wow. If she can do that when I was just holding her up yesterday, then I can do it. And so there's this whole process of this powerful reflection going back and forth. It's almost like being in have you ever looked at one of those fun houses with the mirrors all over the place?
Yes. Those are usually really creepy inside of movies where you're sure someone's going to die. But yes, I know what you're referring to.
But it's like this rapid acceleration of the projection of the image back and forth, and everybody's power is being reflected against everyone else's. And it just like, it's like a supernova. It's a powerful thing to watch. I think we need that we need the connection to human beings, but in absence of our owning our own value and trusting our own selves and getting that we are worthy as we are and perfect as we are, right? Even with all we're perfectly imperfect. Having someone else reflect that back to you is super powerful, and you get to borrow their belief for you. It's easier for us to see things in other people than we can see in ourselves. We're our worst critics most often.
I don't know anybody where it's not that way.
And so when you have other people that you can borrow their belief, because they're like, oh my gosh, you're incredible. And you get to consistently feed that. It's one more way with your eyes, your ears, that you're breaking up those neural pathways, right? You're breaking them up. You're reinstalling, you're recoding your identity. It's beautiful. I could totally geek out on this stuff.
So this is going to be perfect, because I know that we could literally go on forever. And my hope is that we'll be able to go back and do another podcast, and we'll look back on this and be like, damn, so much has happened. So much is learning and growing. And in the interest of being able to leave people with, oh my gosh, how funny and coincidental as I'm thinking this question, it comes to my head. I look up, I don't know if you ever read the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller. It's a really great book. But I was going to ask you, we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
We've been through your journey of the purpose and going from courage and possibility to the struggle and being inside of that welfare office to in essence, going through your own journey of remembering who you are. And then in a way, being able to use sales as a process to help people remember who they are. Mm-hmm. And being able to share that love, that light, rather you said to live, to love, and to, what was the third word? Live, love, and
I don't know.
It's all good. But to really own that life, right? Like, yeah. What is one thing, if you get nothing else out of this, that one person that somebody can walk away with, one thing that they can do to begin to actualize on this, I would imagine, is remembering of how truly spectacular we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny you ask that and you say that, because I just did a 3-minute sermon on Facebook the other day. And that's basically all it was, is that you lack nothing. You're not broken, right? There's nothing you need to replace. You're whole, perfect, and complete as you are. Trust that.
Brilliant. If people are wanting to get connected with you, and they definitely will. No, for seriously, y'all, you want to get connected with her. She's just like a brilliant, brilliant human being. I'm so grateful that you're in my life. What are the ways that people can get connected with you?
So there's so many ways. I live on Facebook, though. That's like my jam. That's where I hang out. So if you just want to connect with me on Facebook, and just look me up, Shameca Tankerson, or you can go to shamecatankerson.com. You can also follow the Raise Your Game podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, some other places. But I'm pretty sure I have a domain, which is raiseyourgameshow.com. Like, what is that? What is it? And if all else fails, Wolf will have all the connection points that you can connect with me. I'm always looking to connect with people, and I'm always teaching. And, for me, I just want to live light, right? As much as I possibly can. I don't always wake up just thinking, oh, I want to do this to inspire people. Again, it's just who I be. And so everything that I do is meant to light a fire inside of you. Who I be is just meant to light a fire inside of you. And so if you're looking to be turned on, there's more that you want to go for, but you're not quite sure what's stopping you. Let's please connect. Just connect with me.
Love, 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 love it. Love you. I'm so grateful as hell that you're here. Is there any final words you'd like to say before the journey that is this wave takes its gentle, peaceful rest?
There's nothing except for thank you. I honor the gift in you, and I appreciate you for inviting me here to listen to me ramble about all the thoughts and feelings that are going on inside of me. And what you're doing is incredible and amazing, as are you.
Thank you. I'm merely a mirror for all that you've pushed at me ever since I've known you. And even though we haven't always been immediately connected, I've always felt you from a distance. I've always seen the light and the love that you're pushing out into the world. My alarm's going off. And I greatly appreciate and admire that. You are definitely inspiring courage and possibility in those around you. And for those of you who are listening, if you've made it this far, gratitude to you. There is so much gold falling out of the sky in this one. You can go so many ways with it, but at the end of the day, as we pointed out, it's always going to come down to making a choice differently than we have in the past. And my hope is always when you're going through this, take something, even if it's just one thing, take it and apply it. Even if it's, I'm just going to decide today, I'm going to work out for 1 minute or 5 minutes. But it starts with a single decision, having that one conversation that was difficult, taking that one scoop of ice cream, eating it and saying, I don't need to eat it anymore. Whatever that is for you, do that, because it starts with one. It is the compound effect. And as always, I encourage you to find, follow, and live your truth, and to follow the wolf within you. How? Love you guys. Thank you so much for listening in. If you got value out of this message,
We would love it if you subscribed and shared it with your tribe so we can continue to share this message and this medicine with people all over the world. Much love and peace be with you.